Why have we let go of the rollover? Now, many families are aware of our current practice, which has been in place for more than 20 years, and you'd be aware that it's different to the other schools in New South Wales. Our current practice is easily understood and easily communicated. And the way that we often speak about it, in fact, the way I've spoken about it to some of you, is to say there are 23 terms in secondary school. Which year should be 3 terms long? And the implied answer is that the best short year would be year 7. There's an intuitive simplicity to that, and it appears to give a straightforward advantage to our senior students in that they have 8 terms in which to complete years 11 and 12, stage 6. However, it's not actually that simple in reality. The rollover is not as good as it seems. Its benefits are actually diminished by a number of issues. And these disadvantages, these compromises, the caveats, they're less visible and they're less easily appreciated, but they are nonetheless real. And again, no single one of them is enough to compel us to get rid of the rollover, but collectively they add up. And the net effect is that when we were seeking solutions to the problems I just mentioned, we didn't consider the rollover to be untouchable. In our professional judgment, the rollover is not a sacred cow. So let me quickly touch on some of the reasons that led us to conclude that we could let go of the rollover. The first one is the rollover doesn't help HSC students. NESA does not permit students to commence stage 6 content before the start of the year 11 calendar year. The rollover does provide an additional term for the IB boys, but in term 4 of the year 10, the HSC boys do bridging courses to prepare for stage 6. Which leads me to the second observation. Being ready for stage 6 is more important than starting stage 6. As we think about these things, it's helpful to distinguish between content and skills and behaviours. Obviously, they're linked, but they are different. Content gets taught at particular points in the curriculum, but skills and behaviours are taught and cultivated continually through a boy's journeys through school. The point is, the boys are able to prepare for success in stage 6 by acquiring skills and behaviours before they commence the stage 6 content. Which brings me to the third point. The fundamental building blocks for success in stage 6 are laid much earlier in school. Band 6s are built in year 7, and so are diploma results of 40 plus. At the moment, we truncate stage 4. We truncate stage year 7. There are compromises and distortions of the curriculum in doing so, and we move students through these crucial foundational years more quickly than the curriculum design intends. Effectively, we accelerate a whole cohort of students. Now, there's nothing wrong with acceleration, and many of our boys are accelerated in individual subjects where that's a good option for their strengths and where it's the best way to extend their learning. But accelerating the whole cohort by a term with no discernment of their readiness for that task is at least questionable. I note that Trinity has a disproportionate number of students on individual education plans. We have to at least ask the question whether accelerating the cohort through the rollover process contributes to that issue. And that brings me to the next point, which is the issue of maturation. We all know that boys mature on their journey through adolescence, and we know that it happens at varying rates. We know that physical maturity, emotional maturity, and cognitive maturity are often unevenly aligned in individual students. And we also know that those maturities vary greatly across the cohort. However, it is inarguable that the boys are more mature on every level in February of year 11 than they are in October in year 10. And in practice, what that means is that the content which gets covered in term 4 of year 10 often needs to be retaught in year 11 simply because of the boys' relative cognitive immaturity. You see, both NESA and the IB office have designed their curricula to be done in a certain number of hours. NESA called them indicative hours, the IB office calls them recommended hours, but either way, they represent the amount of time the curriculum is designed to take for the typical student. And the standard model provides the necessary indicative hours for the HSC and the recommended hours for the IB diploma students. The standard model provides enough time for students to succeed whichever credential they're in. In a slightly tangential point, it might be instructive to consider the experience and the actions of other schools. In the last 20 years, a number of schools have adopted a rollover of one sort or another. It was a particularly popular move around the time of the abolition of the Year 10 school certificate exams. However, over the years, virtually every other school that implemented a rollover has retracted it. I'm only aware of one school that does a partial rollover at the midpoint of term 4. Now, that's not to say we need to fall in line with other schools. It's not to say there's something problematic about having a point of difference. It's just an observation that other schools, including IB diploma schools, have experienced downsides in this model. Another issue which is probably opaque to you is the fact that the rollover creates additional disruption with staffing. You see, most schools do their recruiting of teachers to start at the beginning of a calendar year. That's when teachers mostly change schools. So if we recruit someone who's a great addition to our staff, but they can only come in term 1, then we have to put a temporary arrangement in place for their class in term 4. And if one of our people goes elsewhere to progress their career, they'll usually do that to start in term 1. And that means that the term 4 class they began with has to get a new teacher. Overall, Trinity has a relatively stable staff. Obviously, disruption for long service leave, maternity leave, but the rollover brings additional disruption that we don't need into play. And finally on this topic, I want to note that there is a natural rhythm to school life when it is aligned to our wider community. There is a fresh start that comes with the new year following the long summer break. There's a sense of accomplishment that comes at the end of the year when the work is done. And there's a chance for our young people to rest and to reset during that summer break before they gird their loins for the fresh start of the new year. And I note that this is not the case for the summer between years 11 and 12 as the students move through stage 6, but at all the other school years leading up to this point, the end of the year can be, should be, a genuine break. And the rollover messes a bit with that rhythm. The fresh start isn't entirely a fresh start. The long break has some study hanging over it. The coherence of the year's learning is disrupted by an 8-week hiatus after the first term. I've led the school now in using this rollover model for 3.5 years, and there are certainly strengths to the rollover model, and our school has worked hard over the years to maximise the strengths and to compensate for the weaknesses. In my professional opinion, weighing all the considerations, I would incline to preferring the standard model of the school year by a ratio of probably 60 to 40, perhaps 55 to 45. I think the standard model is overall a better model for educating our boys. The professional opinions across the staff vary. There are some who are strongly in favour of the rollover, there are many who are strongly in favour of the standard model, and everyone else is scattered somewhere in between. Now, again, I want to be really clear, none of these issues that I've listed, and there are others, is a fatal blow by itself to the benefits of the rollover, but collectively, they make the point that the rollover is not as good as it seems. And that's why, as we sought a solution to the challenges we're facing, we were prepared to contemplate a solution and ultimately to choose a solution that included letting go of the rollover.